Hi, and welcome to Crash Course Cryptozoology. My name is Carrick St-Laurent. I am a student of anthropology at New Hampshire's Plymouth State University, and I am also an aspiring young cryptozoologist. I've been running this channel for about 2 years now, and recently, especially for those who have watched my previous video, I've been getting into the idea of doing online lectures, and this is my second go at one. And actually, before I start this one, I would like to address a problem with my last lecture, which was on the Yeti trackway recently found in Macalabaroon National Park by the Indian Army. I vouched in that lecture that these were quite possibly the tracks of an unknown animal. I did not necessarily posit that they were the Yetis per se, but that they were unidentified. Someone has actually pointed out in the comments of that video that it seems likely these are actually the tracks of a woolly hare. And considering the research I did on woolly hares, including how large they grow, how strong they are, how far they can jump, what elevations they live at, and even for when their breeding season is, it actually seems quite likely that those are the tracks of a woolly hare. So major congratulations to that person for figuring that out. I applaud you. That was a very good analysis of that, and I apologize for the misrepresentation of the issue. Now, that being said, I will now start this new lecture, which I call The Political History of the Jersey Devil. Now, for those of you who don't know the Jersey Devil, here is an introduction to the subject. This is an illustration from the book The Legend of the Jersey Devil. The book is written by Tricka Noble and was illustrated by Gerald Kelly. As the excerpt here states, "As Mother Leeds labored far into that dark, stormy night, she became more and more agitated. She already had 12 children and was angry that there would be one more. She didn't want this 13th child. Outside, the storm raged as Mother Leeds began to groan wildly, for the birth was near. Suddenly, Mother Leeds let out a savage howl and screamed, 'Oh, let it be a devil!' In a flash of lightning and clap of thunder, Mother Leeds' 13th child was born, but it was no ordinary child." And here we have two very traditional depictions, you could say, of the Jersey Devil. I believe the one on the left here is actually an illustration based off of a very famous eyewitness case that involved a Civil War general who claimed to see this flying animal above their, I want to say above their platoon, but I don't quite know military terms, so I apologize if that's incorrect. And the other one, I believe, is a depiction that can be seen on an old colonial map of the area of New Jersey. Now, this is a bit of an improper introduction to the Jersey Devil, but it's very significant to this lecture. The Jersey Devil, cryptozoologically speaking, is this strange, flying, horse, bat-like animal that's described as, it has a horse's body, the wings of a bat and the shoulder blades, often has a serpentine tail, and horns, ram horns on its head is usually how it's described. And it's quite interesting because it's a major part of North American, especially colonial American, folklore. What I want to point out here, though, is that this supernatural folkloric origin to this cryptid, and it is considered a cryptid because there are allegedly modern sightings, and we'll talk about that as well. I want to, I suppose you would say, set the record straight on that, because I think that there's a misconception being the supernatural origin. We do know the origins of many aspects of the Jersey Devil. None of them exactly are, none of them in general are supernatural, although they may have been considered so for time in some ways. And again, I don't want to divulge too many details I don't want to divulge them prematurely, so we'll just go ahead. And here is a more humorous depiction that shows you how so embedded in folklore this has become, it's almost a commercial property at this point. In fact, if you know the New Jersey's hockey team, or one of their hockey teams at least, then you know that in fact it is a pop icon at this point. So here we get into the real origins of the Jersey Devil. On the left here we have a picture of a christening record from Essex, England. And if you look towards the bottom here, you'll see some familiar names, and the names are the name Leeds. They pop up several times. If you remember from the supernatural origin, Mother Leeds allegedly gave birth to the Jersey Devil. And we see a particular name here, near the bottom, Daniel Leeds, son of Thomas and Mary Leeds. So this is his christening document right here, along with some other children, it would seem. And the thing about Daniel Leeds is that he ended up in New Jersey at some point in his life. He ended up in what is now modern-day Burlington, when New Jersey was still simply part of the 13 colonies. This is mid-1700s, by the way. Or I apologize, early 1700s. Now, Daniel Leeds was a Quaker, but the interesting thing about him was that he was a very, you could say, unorthodox Quaker. He held views that today we would consider borderline scientific, but at that time were pagan or even, blasphemic, one might say. And he documented this research of his in the American Almanac. This is an edition from 1694, as we can see here, an almanac for the year of Christian account, 1694. And from the creation of the world, unfortunately this part is scratched out. It seems to say perhaps 5,660, although this may be a very inaccurate translation because it's a very muddled text. But what you can see is that down here it says by Daniel Leeds. This is in fact Daniel's almanac. And Daniel was, well, he was looked down upon for this, to say the least. This is an excursion into that sort of information base by Darcy Nadel, who wrote this article for a website called Allocation. Leeds' almanac was accused by the Quaker meeting of using inappropriate language, as well as symbols and names that were too pagan for their liking. At their next gathering, Leeds made a public apology, but still an order was sent out to collect and destroy all the copies of his almanac, that is. This made Leeds resentful, and he broke with the group and continued publishing his almanac. And up here we also see the American Almanac contained astrological data, among other things. So again, there's the sort of scientific area of that was unfortunately thrown out by the Quaker community. So Daniel, he put up with this for quite a long time and eventually decided that he was getting too old for it, and like most businessmen, tried to pass the business down to his son Titan Leeds. And here we have an edition of the Almanac, the American Almanac, by Titan. The American Almanac for the year of Christian account, 1738. Here is where we get into the mid-1700s. And at the bottom we see by Titan Leeds. Now Titan was a very interesting person because by all historical accounts, Titan was a bit more... his beliefs were a bit more far-fetched than his father's were, even by today's standards. And of course, him taking over the Almanac was quite a... it seemed quite ridiculous for the people at that time, quite frankly. What's interesting, though, is one of these people happened to be a young Benjamin Franklin, who, of course, would go on to be one of the founding fathers of the modern American nation. Here we have an excerpt about Benjamin Franklin from Brian Regal. The upstart Franklin was angling to make a name for himself as a publisher. As a publicity stunt, Franklin, in the guise of Poor Richard Saunders, claimed that astrological calculations showed that Titan Leeds would die in 1733. When the prediction didn't pan out, Leeds called Franklin a fool and a liar. Never missing a beat, Franklin claimed that since Titan Leeds had died, his ghost must be doing all the shouting. Leeds tried to defend himself, but Franklin kept a straight face and argued that Leeds had been resurrected from the dead. The plan worked. Poor Richard's Almanac became famous, while the pioneering Leeds Almanac, aka the American Almanac, dwindled. Titan Leeds actually did die in 1738. So that almanac that we saw earlier was actually published the year he died. It's quite likely that was his final almanac. As revolutionary fervor grew in the mid-18th century and Americans looked for targets to exercise their anti-British feelings, the Leeds family made easy marks. Now, before I go on with this quote, I want to establish a knowledge base about what it is, the relationship between Franklin and Leeds. Titan did not take criticism well, and he certainly did not take jokes about him very well. And you could say that this young Benjamin Franklin was something to the effect of a... what would you say? Provocateur is probably the right word. And he found that it was quite lucrative to get someone as Titan angry, quite frankly, because Titan threw fits and he was angry. And, that was great for drama because people loved drama. They still love drama, just look at today's TV shows. So Franklin was a provocateur at the time, and he really loved digging into Titan Leeds. And it's important to note that this is where the image of hostility comes in for the Leeds family, which is why they start to make easy marks. They're just not people who are supportive of the British Empire. They're also quite, in the mind of these people, a ridiculous bunch of individuals. they had sided with the Empire and the hated Lord Cornbury, and had been charged with somehow being involved in the occult. Very interesting. The slander there involves supernatural implications. By the time of the Revolutionary War, the quote-unquote Leeds Devil stood as a symbol of political ridicule and scorn. Now, this article is fantastic, but it doesn't actually tell you the origin of the Leeds Devil, unfortunately, and I'll explain that. Benjamin Franklin, when he was, specifically in the time period that he was making, the jokes that Titan had been resurrected or possessed or was a ghost, he began to call Titan the Leeds Devil, and eventually actually referred to him as the Jersey Devil, due to the humorous image of him as some kind of supernatural doppelganger of the original Titan Leeds. And here we actually have an enhanced image of what might have been his last almanac. And what's quite interesting, some people pointed out, is that there seems to be a winged creature on the family crest of the Leeds family. Now, I'm actually here to dispel this, but I want to give you as much information as possible. Some have pointed out that the very description, the horse-like animal with the wings of a bat and the horns of a goat and the serpentine tail, may actually be attributed to this symbol because it may actually be what's called a wyvern. Now, in English art terms, a wyvern was essentially a small dragon of some kind. Here we have a very good depiction of a wyvern with the folded wings, this two-headed reptilian clawed lizard, very, very threatening. It's got the horns, it's got a very long tail with a head at the end again, and of course it flies, and dragons all sort of have these robust heads that are somewhat horse-like. However, I would like to posit that while this is an interesting point, it doesn't seem to be relevant to the Jersey Devil case. The reason I say that is because a closer look at a more modern interpretation of the Leeds family crest shows not wyverns, but some kind of bird, perhaps an eagle or a hawk. And looking back at the old coat of arms, we can see that indeed this does seem to be feathered wings and these sort of perched bird-like legs. This does not seem to be a wyvern, although it is a very interesting observation. It seems to be a bird rather than this sort of demonic entity that might be attributed to the Jersey Devil. Now, of course, with all this built up, the popular media, you could say, steps in and decides, well, we're going to take this idea of the Leeds or Jersey Devil and run with it. And run with it they did. Here's a very good example of the, what would you even call this? The image of the Jersey Devil created by the media, per se. Maybe not even the media necessarily, but by people who are very willing to exploit the Jersey Devil idea for their own monetary gain. Here we have a flyer for a museum/traveling circus that says, Knight and Arch Museum caught and here alive the Leeds Devil, captured Friday after a terrific struggle. Swims, flies, gallops, a living dragon, 10 cents admits to all. Now, of course here, if you had found the Jersey Devil and had it caught, surely you wouldn't be parading it around, you'd be bringing it forward for discovery as a species. Of course, what ended up happening, I believe, was that this was an imported kangaroo, as much as I know, that had these fake wings taped to it, roughly. Maybe not taped, but attached to it, to make it look as though it was a Jersey Devil. Of course, many people at the time had not seen a kangaroo, and so this is quite an interesting thing, but nonetheless was in fact not the Jersey Devil. But it was certainly the beginning of the exploitation of the Jersey Devil. And here we have a modern version of this. This was a hoax perpetrated, I want to say, in 2015, 2016. And this individual claimed that while driving through Pennsylvania, I believe, they had photographed this creature flying above the tree line. Photo analysts have analyzed this picture and have shown that this is in fact not real because there is digital editing seen around the actual subject, meaning that this subject was either implemented in the photo itself or perhaps even copy and pasted from somewhere else. Now, we've at this point dispelled the idea, we've at least dispelled the likelihood, my apologies, that the supernatural origin for the Jersey Devil is correct. It seems that it is based in some fact, it uses some fact, but as a chain of events, it is likely to be very untrue. Rather, it seems that there are heavy political forces at play with the Jersey Devil. There may even still be. That being said, that does not mean that there is not very tantalizing, interesting, pieces of evidence that suggest that there is a strange phenomenon happening in the Pine Barrens. This is one that I've been following recently. I've actually been trying to get into contact with the man who posted these photographs. These are called the Coulter photographs, or at least that's what I call them. They were posted on Facebook by Michael Coulter recently, a few weeks ago. Allegedly, they were taken in October of 2018, and they purport to show what Stephen Coulter called a Jersey Devil. It seems to be raising up on its hind legs in these sets of photographs. Of course, the validity of these photographs are not known, but they are certainly not so far disproven. We also have another case I've been following, the Winkleman case. The Winkleman case, which you can actually see on Monster Quest's episode of the Jersey Devil, involved the Winkleman family who lives in New Jersey. One night in December, I believe of January of 2004, encountered this flying creature in their backyard late one night, and the creature allegedly ran across their roof, and they came out the next morning and found these strange hoof prints in the fresh snow on the roof. It is important to note that this is a publicized sighting, so officials would know of this report, and if it was a false report, they would take note of that. And it is claimed in the report that Fish and Game and local police did in fact investigate the tracks and could not identify them. If that had been slander, you would have thought that the family would have been come down on by Fish and Game Wildlife or by the police. Interestingly enough, that's not happened. We also have this photograph, allegedly from Winslow, New Jersey, in the 1960s. The date's unknown, unfortunately, and it appears to be a mutilated cow carcass hanging from a telephone wire. It is true that some predators, like birds of prey and even, mountain lions, will bring their prey up to certain elevations, even up telephone poles occasionally, to eat them. Why exactly they do this depends on the circumstance. However, that can't be the case here, even though it is hard to explain otherwise because, well, there's no cat or bird that can tightrope walk this well, let's just say that. We also have eyewitness sightings, which I've mentioned at the beginning of this lecture, from very interesting individuals, one of whom being Joseph Bonaparte, brother to the notorious Napoleon Bonaparte. While he was away in exile in the Americas, he allegedly had a sighting while out fox hunting of a creature that is described as a horse with horns and wings and everything that makes it the Jersey Devil, roughly. And a friend he had who lived in the area claimed, had told him that he had seen the Jersey Devil after the sighting occurred. So in conclusion, I'd like to tell you that it's good to do your research on these things because it's interesting to note that the Jersey Devil has these political implications, and it's good to know that because that certainly furthers the idea that we may very well be looking at some kind of long-standing hoax here. That's entirely possible. That also being said, and also that being the main point, I'd also like to make the side point that there is very interesting evidence that suggests that something very odd is going on in the Pine Barrens. That will be all for the lecture today. I hope you all have enjoyed watching. I hope you've learned something. Thank you for watching.